Universidad de Manila, and we are going to discuss today about separating and retaining employee performance. Separating and retaining employee performance is a topic in Strategic Human Resource Management, or as we call SHRM.
To give you guys a quick overview, we have an outline of this chapter's objectives. Number 1. We are going to distinguish between involuntary and voluntary turnover and describe their effects on an organization. Number 2. We are going to discuss how employees determine whether the organization treats them fairly. Number 3. We are going to identify legal requirements for employee discipline. Number 4, we are going to summarize ways in which organizations can fairly discipline employees. And number 5, we are going to explain how job dissatisfaction affects employee behavior. And lastly, number 6, we are going to describe how organizations contribute to employees' job satisfaction and retain key employees.
Now, to start, the core of this chapter is about how organizations meet the challenges of managing high-performing and low-performing employees. And of course, in an organization, you look for people who could give their best and all at work, and they are what these organizations need and prefer to retain. So why? There are research providing evidence that retaining employees also help retain customer and increase sales. But how? Okay, when an organization has low records of turnovers and has satisfied employees, they tend to have great performance. Conversely, if employees perform poorly, the organization will have to take certain actions for the betterment of their services. And now, as we have mentioned a while ago about turnovers, let's explore it further. Okay, so heading on to managing voluntary and involuntary turnover. In terms of managing, it is the organization's duty to ensure that good performers want to stay with them and that poor performers are encouraged or forced to leave. How this happens is divided into two possibilities.
Involuntary turnover. This happens as initiated by the organization itself, and often with employees who prefer to stay. This is what's commonly known as termination. There are a lot of reasons why this could happen. Some examples are drug use or laying off employees during a downturn. Voluntary turnover. This happens as initiated by the employee and often with those organizations who prefer to keep them. There are certain costs associated with turnovers, either voluntarily or involuntarily, which is why organizations try to avoid the need for involuntary turnover and minimize voluntary turnover. Therefore, an effective human resource management is needed to be carried out. Retaining top performers is not always easy, and recent trends in our society at large is making it more difficult than ever.
Next is employee separation. Because of the critical financial and personal risks associated with employee dismissal, it is easy to see why organizations must develop a standardized, systematic approach to discipline and discharge. This does not happen without political interventions needed to execute such action. There are certain principles, legal requirements, disciplines, resolutions, programs, and even counseling that are incorporated here in terms of employee separation. Let us begin with So the first subtopic of employee separation is the principles of justice. We always aim towards equality and fairness. This talks about how employees determine whether the organization treats them fairly based on the system's outcomes and procedures, and how managers treat them during the carry out of these procedures. Therefore, sensitivity of systems in dismissing or in discharging employees is critical. These principles are characterized into three parts, which are outcome fairness, procedural justice, and interactional justice. First, we get to outcome fairness.
Outcome fairness depends on employees' judgment that the consequences of a decision are just. A consequence should be consistent with that of others. Second, they need to know what to expect by clearly communicating policies regarding consequences of inappropriate behavior. And lastly, outcomes should be proportionate to behavior. For example, terminating an employee on his or her first time of being late would make it seem very out of proportion to the offense. Procedural justice. Here we are talking about judgment that fair methods were used to determine the consequences an employer receives. 6 principles determine whether people perceive procedures as fair, which are consistent procedures, avoidance of bias, accurate information, way to correct mistakes, representation of all interests, and ethical standards. Again, just like in outcome fairness, consistency is needed and managers should strictly suppress any biases. Information needs to be perfectly accurate and infallible. Procedures are subject to correction and improvement as well. Also, interests and concerns of everyone is taken into account and procedures are consistent with ethical standards such as of privacy and honesty. Interactional justice. In this aspect, we talk about judgment that the organization carried out its actions in a way that took the employees' feelings into account. It is also about how managers interact with their employees, hence the word interactional. In disciplinary actions, managers should listen to and treat employees with dignity and respect, empathize with them, and be polite.
Next, we go on to legal requirements, which is another subtopic of employee separation. Aside from considering certain principles, employers must also meet certain requirements. They must avoid 2 things, which are wrongful discharge and discrimination, and meet 2 standards, employees' privacy and notification of layoffs. Let's discuss each 4 by starting with the first one.
Wrongful discharge. Avoiding wrongful discharge could mean 2 things. 1. It must not violate an implied agreement. An implied agreement is considered violated in terms of employee termination if the employer had promised the employee job security or if the action is inconsistent with company policies. 2. It must not violate public policy. It is a violation of public policy to terminate an employee for doing what the law requires, or others such as terminating an employee for refusing to do something illegal, unethical, or unsafe. Now, what does the HR have to do to avoid such things? There are a few. By establishing and communicating policies for handling misbehavior, defining unacceptable behaviors, and identify how the organization will respond to them. Follow these procedures consistently and document precisely the reasons for disciplinary action. Organizations should also train managers to avoid making promises that imply job security. And, in writing and reviewing employee handbooks, HR should avoid any statements that could be interpreted as employment contracts. Discrimination. As benefits of having formal disciplinary policies that are carefully documented to avoid claims such as discrimination, either of age, gender, socioeconomic status, race, and etc., organizations must comply with equal employment opportunities requirements, most especially when disciplinary actions are being undertaken. Employees' privacy. There are certain measures to take in handling private information of employees. Although employers have legitimate reasons for learning about some personal matters, especially when behavior outside the workplace can affect productivity, workplace safety, and employee morale. Privacy issues surface when employers wish to search or monitor employees on the job. Employers can act fairly and minimize the likelihood of a lawsuit by publicizing the search policy, applying it consistently, asking for employees' consent before the search begins, and conducting the search discreetly. Notification of layoffs. Sometimes terminations are necessary for economic reasons. The federal law requires organizations that plans broad-scale layoffs to give notice 60 days before a layoff, especially those who have more than 100 employees. If employers covered by this law do not give notice to the employees, they may have to provide back pay and fringe benefits and pay penalties, so seeking legal advice before implementing layoffs or planned closing is a must and highly encouraged.
Progressive discipline. Organizations look for methods of handling problem behavior that are fair, legal, and effective. The principles of justice suggest that the organization prepare for problems by establishing a formal discipline process in which the consequences become more serious if the employee repeats the offense.
Employee discipline. To ensure that progressive discipline is happening in the workplace and certain for the employees, rules and policies must be fair, legal, and effective in such a way that it is consistent, fair, proportionate with behavior, and it is clearly communicated. Hot stove rule. An effective and popular response the HR could do when faced with a certain problem is by the use of the hot stove rule. This principle says that discipline should be like a hot stove. The burning stove gives warning not to touch, and whoever ignores will be burned. The stove has no feelings to influence which people it burns, and it delivers the same burn to any touch, and the burn is immediate. Like the hot stove, an organization's discipline should give warning and have consequences that are consistent, objective, and immediate. Progressive discipline responses. The HR would need to meet a series of responses when faced with a problem in the workplace, such as infractions, and then be able to communicate these rules effectively by and through writing to every employee, presenting the handbook, posting on company's intranet, or displaying it on a bulletin board. Also, documentation is highly needed for this, to demonstrate clearly the problem to the employee and determines the need for defending a lawsuit. Employers can support the discipline system's fairness in gathering objective performance data by using a performance management system.
I hope you've learned a lot from this part of our discussion, and the next reporter will be further discussing the remaining subtopics for employee separation and more. Thank you for listening. Let's proceed.
Alternative dispute resolution. Methods of solving a problem by bringing in an impartial outsider but not using the court system. It is timely, constructive, cost-effective. Sometimes, problems are easier to solve when an impartial person helps create the solution. Therefore, at various points in the discipline process, the employee or organization might want to bring in someone to help with problem solving. Let's check the 4 types of alternative dispute resolution. Consists of open door policy, peer review, mediation, and arbitration. Typically, an organization's ADR process begins with an open door policy, which is the simplest, most direct, and least expensive way to settle a dispute. When the parties to a dispute cannot resolve it themselves, the organization can move the dispute to peer review, mediation, or arbitration. At some organizations, if mediation fails, the process moves to arbitration as a third and final option. Let's check the Employee Assistance Program. Referral surveys that employees can use to seek professional treatment for emotional problems or substance and alcohol abuse. It started in 1980s, and research found out into depressed employees found a large number of majority who use CAP services reported improvements in their condition and increased productivity. Today, many are now fully integrated into employers' overall health benefit plans, where they refer employees to cover mental health services. Supervisors are trained to use the referral services for employees who they suspect of having health-related problems. Let's check the outplacement counseling. Service in which professionals try to help dismissed employees manage the job transition from one job to another. It's important for employee and organization to ease stress and anxiety, improves morale and productivity, protects company's reputation, and avoids litigation. Organizations may also address ongoing poor performance with discussions about whether the employee is a good fit for the current job. Rather than simply firing the poor performer, the supervisor may encourage this person to think about leaving. In this situation, the availability of outplacement counseling may help the employee decide to look for another job. This approach may protect the dignity of the employee who lives and promote a sense of fairness. Let's check the employee engagement. The degree to which employees are fully involved in their work and the strength of their commitment to their job and company. Employees who are engaged in their work and committed to the company they work for provide a clear competitive advantage to that firm, including higher productivity, better customer service, and lower turnover. Employers are more likely to be engaged in companies where profits are rising than a company with flat or falling profits, according to research by Quantum Workplace. The same research found out that the companies with flat or falling profits, employees were less likely to feel valued, trust in your management, or see their work as aligned with corporate strategy. Next, job withdrawal. A set of behaviors with which employees try to avoid the situation physically, mentally, or emotionally. In circumstances such as the nature of the job, supervisors and coworkers, pay levels, or the employee's own disposition causes the employee to become dissatisfied with the job. Job withdrawal may take the form of behavior change, physical job withdrawal, or psychological withdrawal. Some researchers believe employees engage in the three forms of withdrawal behavior in that order. While others think they select from these behaviors to address the particular sources of job dissatisfaction they experience. Let's check the job dissatisfaction. Managers should catch and correct job dissatisfaction early because there is evidence linking changes in satisfaction levels to turnover. When satisfaction is falling, employees are far more likely to quit. The causes of job dissatisfaction identified in four categories: personal dispositions, tasks and roles, supervisors, coworkers, and pay and benefits. Many aspects of tasks have been linked to dissatisfaction. Particularly significant are the complexity of the task, the degree of physical strain and exertion required, and the value of the employee places on the task. Now, let's check the job dissatisfaction. Personal disposition. The negative affectivity of it, pervasive low levels of satisfaction with all aspects of life compared with other people's feelings. Anger, contempt, disgust, fuel, guilt, fear, and nervousness. Negative self-evaluations tend to blame other people for their problems, including their dissatisfying jobs, less likely to work toward change, and lastly, they either do nothing or act aggressively toward the people they blame. In tasks and roles, it's a set of behaviors that people expect of person in a particular job. Let's check the role-related sources of satisfaction. Role ambiguity. Uncertainty about what the organization and others expect from the employee in terms of what to do or how to do it. Unclear about work methods, scheduling, and performance criteria. In role conflict, it's said that demands of the job are incompatible or contradictory. Work role and family role conflict. In role overload, too many expectations or demands are placed on a person. Organization downsizing. Employers particularly want to know how the organization will evaluate their performance when they aren't sure they become dissatisfied. According to role conflict, it may be triggered by the organization's request that an employee take an assignment overseas. Foreign assignments can be highly disruptive to family members, and resulting online conflict is the top reason that people quit overseas assignment. Now, let's check the job dissatisfaction about supervisors and coworkers. First, it affects job satisfaction, and next, a person may be satisfied with them because they share same values, attitudes, and philosophies, provide social support, sympathetic and caring, and last, help the person attain some valued outcome. The negative behavior of it is managers and peers in the workplace can produce tremendous dissatisfaction. Leadership and visibility of senior managers play an even greater role in their level of engagement with their work. Often, much of the responsibility for positive relationship is placed on direct supervisors. For example, employees want their supervisors to define expectations clearly, measure progress fairly and accurately, and acknowledge their accomplishments. For example, giving assignments suitable for their skills and providing access for necessary resources. Employees want some evidence that the company's leader care about them, so they are more likely to be dissatisfied if management is distant and unresponsive. Fees and benefits. Organizations make decisions about whether to match or exceed the industry averages. HR professionals can increase job satisfaction to the employees by value of their benefits, reason behind limited raises, and explain pay structure. Also, employees care about their earnings. Job primary source of income, pay indicator of status within the organization and society, the self-worth, and satisfaction with pay is significant for retaining employees. It also includes the pay, benefits, and vacation time. For all the concerned with positive relationship and interesting work, it's important to keep in mind that employees definitely care about their earnings. A job is the primary source of income and financial security for most people. Pay is also an indicator of status within the organization and society at large, so it contributes to some people's self-worth. For all these reasons, satisfaction with pay is significant for retaining employees. Benefits such as insurance and vacation time are also important, but employees often have difficulty measuring their worth. Therefore, although benefits influence job satisfaction, employees may not always consider them as much as pay itself.
Let's talk about behavior changes, physical and psychological job withdrawal. Dissatisfied employees can negatively affect a company due to their lack of motivation, they perform poorly, and possess negative attitude. This indication may spread throughout the whole company and may affect the department and the company's bottom line.
In the behavioral changes, it will produce low morale among workers and it is highly undesirable. If one of the employees feel that they're having less engagement in their job, they will have a negative attitude which will lead to a drop in productivity. Physical and psychological job withdrawal is a disengagement from the organization that usually happen when the employees are psychologically and physically displaying absenteeism and leaving. It is a primary responsibility of organization to learn that employees are satisfied with their jobs through measurement of job satisfaction, as any combination of psychological, physiological, and environmental event that cause a person to truthfully say that they are satisfied with a job. Job satisfaction links to motivation, which employees can gain even more of when realizing their full potential. Besides, providing adequate salaries and health insurance, much more can be done by companies to motivate and guide employees. Let us talk about the 4 components of job satisfaction. First, a personal disposition. Personal disposition is a person's true character, attitude, and outlook. A personal disposition is an inborn trait, sometimes inherited from one's parent. Second, the task and role is a grouping of competency, an accomplishment that is required for a worker to perform a certain function in the organization. In job satisfaction is the extent to which the employee feels motivated, content, and satisfied with his job. Third, supervisor and coworkers. Supervisor and coworkers are the individual that may help others to be captured by sharing the same values, attitudes, and philosophies. Last, the pay and benefits. First, people won't work for you without pay, and unless you're a non-profit organization, it is illegal to ask them to work for you for free. There is a social contract between the employer and the employee, where the employee puts in the work and the employer rewards this. Compensation and benefits refer to the benefits a firm provides to its employee in exchange for their labor. The benefits cover indirect pay. This can be health insurance, stock option, or any myriad of things offered to employee. Let us now proceed to the summary of our discussion. Retaining an employee is an important component of a healthy organization. Losing an employee is called turnover. Turnover can be very expensive to an organization, which is why it is important to develop retention plans to manage turnover. Voluntary turnover is turnover that is initiated by the employee, while the involuntary turnover is initiated by the organization for various reasons such as non-performance. Direct turnover costs and indirect turnover costs can include the costs associated with the employee replacement, declining employee morale, or lost customers. Some of the reasons why employees leave can include the poor match between job and skills, no growth potential, pay inequity among employees, the fairness and communication styles of management, and heavy workloads.